that media quote is worth repeating. I mean, the goal of the media is to make every problem your problem. And I would add a sentence, to sell product. I mean, like a lot of people forget this. The media is just an ad delivery vehicle.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with a couple of people, mostly on the right, but by no means entirely, that work in television. And they're pretty open about this. I mean, if you ever do an interview with live, really, it's Fox, but I assume CNN, MSNBC, so on are the same. There's a very hard break before each commercial. Like, you'll hear words in your ear like, we got to get you done. You'll say your piece, and then the ad for Toyota Tundras will come on. So I would assume that across the ideological spectrum, there's definitely a desire to run the content that generates the most clicks. Yeah. So the goal is to make every problem your problem. Is to get you almost panicked and wired into the screen. And that's because that's what sells advertising in an environment where you're moving commercials for, $500,000 per hit.
Yeah.
So I think that in terms of the broader, and I'll get into some other people that might benefit, but in terms of what you just said, the average person would get the figures for police shooting and especially police killings of blacks wildly wrong. That's not a hypothetical. I mean, the Skeptic Research Center recently did a well-done large-in survey where they asked people how many unarmed black men they thought were killed annually just each year by cops. And the average answer from people that identify as leftist or liberal was around 10,000. And it's worth expanding that a little bit. They didn't all say 10,000, but it was for very liberal. I think it was 30 to 40% of them said it was about 1,000 or more than 1,000. Then another 14 to 15% said that it was about 10,000. And then 8% said that it was more than that, like more than 10,000 people annually, black people annually, were murdered while unarmed by the police. And it's worth putting that in context. I mean, 2020 and 2021 have seen near record highs for murders, at least in the recent past. And there's still only about 20,000 murders per year. And black people are overrepresented, but we only commit maybe half of them. So the number of people that these guys thought were killed by cops annually while black is larger than the number in many cases of black murders total that there are in a year. So when you say it's overestimation by an order of magnitude or more, that's literally correct in the sense of 10 to 1 or square up 100 to 1. You're talking about 18 unarmed black men that are killed by police, not 10,000. So that's an incredible discrepancy. By the way, when we look at regular media consumers, though, we find these sort of discrepancies all the time. I mean, Kex TC, the large consulting firm, recently found, and this is back in 2021, I believe, this is 2022 now, but they recently found that the average American believes that 9% of the population has died of COVID. So that's the typical figure. People act as though they're being reasonable. They'll say, well, I don't think it's 20%. I don't think it's 30%. It's 8%. I mean, now COVID-19, terrible scourge, took about 400,000 people last year, but there are 350 million Americans. That's roughly 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 900. If 9% of the population or 10% of the population was dead, that would be around 32 million people.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be coffins lining the streets. We wouldn't be able to bury that many people in the cemetery land we have available. So people that are constantly exposed to the media, as read the most random topics from killer bees to child kidnapping, tend to be very, very afraid. We've known this since Glassner, a left-wing but very skilled sociologist, pointed out in 1999, the culture of fear. So who benefits from all this goddamn terror? I think that you're saying, well, the media companies obviously benefit from it. Yeah, sure. I think that's probably half the answer. The other thing people forget, though, is often it's just Grant buried in Grant's tomb. I mean, who benefits from this constant panicking around race relations and so on? The groups that are designed to initiate panic around race relations. I mean, so we sometimes forget how large the grievance industrial sector is. I mean, there's some groups that are loosely affiliated with this sector, like 100 Black Men, that do great work. But a lot of them are just sort of on bullshit since the 1960s ended. I can't think of a positive thing, really, Reverend Al or Brother Jesse, or Sean King, for that matter, has done for the Black community. And the figures go significantly beyond Reverend Al's 1990s budget at this point. I mean, Black Lives Matter received $11 billion. If you look at the primary organizations like BLM, GNF, over the past couple of years. That's a famous Economist article from last July. So who benefits from this? The people that received $11 billion benefit. I mean, I would assume the ACLU, SPLC, the national BLM chapters, very powerful players work together to coordinate the flow of this information into mass media. So the kind of structural model isn't necessarily all that complicated.